By 1796, the French revolutionary armies were tired, hungry, and undersupplied and becoming desperate, but also more confident. For their young, ambitious generals, the stakes could not be higher. Unbridled by the constraints of the rigid class system of the old order, a successful general now could rise from the ranks to the very highest levels of command. But the reward for failure, or indeed any perceived lack of daring, could lead to just a dramatic conclusion the other way, and a very sharp end to their career. Facing them was the Imperial Royal Army, led by Archduke Charles. This army is often referred to as the Austrians, but was actually a multinational force drawn from across the far-flung corners of the Habsburg Empire. This army was also beset with problems of supply and reorganizations, plus the added difficulties of trying to meld together conscripted troops with different languages, cultures, and even different training and drill techniques. Many years later, Archduke Charles would reform the Austrian army, but this was still many years away, and while some Austrian units were excellent, the French saw their opponents as a rotten tree, overladen with fruit, ripe for the plucking. In March 1796, the young Bonaparte was dispatched south to take command of the army of Italy, while Moreau and Jourdan were to command the two prongs of an ambitious invasion of southern Germany. The bold plan was for all three armies to then meet up in the Tyrol for a march on Vienna. Bonaparte's dramatic and successful campaign and eventual elevation to Emperor Napoleon has led to a massive study and information of his glorious march through Italy. But what of Moreau and Jourdan's campaigns? Less well known or recorded is the attempted invasion of Germany, and it provides a fascinating series of battles. The forces involved are reasonably sized for Napoleonic times, not huge, and fairly well matched. The absence of too much historical detail or any famous commanders on the scene also allows for far more imagination and flexibility, and the campaign provides an ideal backdrop for wargamers to create their own conflicts and challenges. Jourdan took the army of the Sambre et Meuse into the Middle Rhine area and immediately drove the Austrians back at the Battle of Altenkirchen, before then besieging Ehrenbreitstein fortress. Archduke Charles adopted a policy of falling back until he could concentrate his forces for a counterstroke. This he finally achieved at Wetzlar and started driving the French armies back again. Jourdan had bitten off more than he could chew and was sent reeling back north, away from his partner armies in the Rhine-et-Moselle, which had crossed the Rhine further south to provide the other prong of the attack. This southern French army was faring much better, crossing the Rhine at Kiel, near Strasbourg. The Austrian army defending the southern approaches consisted mostly of Germans from the Holy Roman Empire and disaffected Frenchmen. Worried about their continued support after this defeat, Charles had them disarmed and moved south himself to deal with the threat and took a further 20,000 troops with him. The campaign then became a series of marches, counter-marches, retreats, holding engagements and pursuits. Everything a wargamer could need. We will be adding more historical background and details in this often overlooked campaign as we play out a series of battles based on the historical events. This particular battle is set during Moreau's retreat north and is based on the events leading to the Battle of Biberach in October 1796. By this time, the Archduke Charles had inflicted defeats on the French at Amberg and Würzburg, and both French armies had forced retreat across the Rhine. Maximilian Anton Karl, Count Ballet de la Tour, was in pursuit of Moreau and had chased him all the way to the German border and the crossing of the Rhine. Maybe he was afraid of returning to France in disgrace, or purely down to having noticed that La Tour had been over-enthusiastic in his pursuit, Moreau unexpectedly turned to fight and gave the now outnumbered Austrians a severe mauling. Having been taught some respect by this rabbit, the hounds now kept a respectful distance, and Moreau was able to continue the return home with a victory in the bag and no further incidents. In our version of events, Latour has pursued a little less vigorously, giving time for reinforcements to arrive and for his force to now match Moreau's. What will happen this time, when the rabbit turns and attempts to bite the hound? Our battle takes place near the fictional town of Arniesdorf. It is autumn 1796. Moreau is leading a French army through southwest Germany, back towards the French border, but is caught at Arniesdorf by an Austrian army under Count Neuendorf. Moreau deploys his forces for battle. His centre is on the Arniesberg, behind which nestles Arniesdorf itself. On his right is the Leonberg, which he defends, leaving the village of Leonkirchen in front of his line. Beyond the Leonberg are some woods and fields. To Moreau's left are what's known as the Twin Woods, with a gap between them which Moreau prepares to defend, leaving the woods themselves unoccupied. Will that be a mistake? Neuendorf arrives at the village of Zavihausen before the French position and considers his options. He can see the French army ahead of him, but cannot yet come close enough to make out what the French units are. So as I step into the shoes of Neuendorf, I decide that the right flank is my only real means of attacking, through the Twin Woods, to take on the corps that's deploying over there. So my first corps deployed right in the centre, not to give the game away and keep my opponent honest. And deploy a second corps right out on the far right, with the obvious route of going between those woods. And I made it too obvious, perhaps, because my plan was, my hope was that Moreau would then deploy a unit on his other flank in the traditional manner, which would leave them out the game if I can attack quickly, seize Arniesdorf before nightfall, and possibly break the French army and send them fleeing back. But Moreau is a wily old dog, and his reserve has been placed slap bang in the centre where he can support any position wherever I make the breakthrough. This is not going to be any more room for subtlety. I'm going to deploy the last corps to the front on this right hand flank. Their job is to break through that gap as quickly as possible, do as much damage, whatever costs themselves, with the brigade behind them, or the corps behind them, of guard, consisting of the grenadiers and the heaviest cavalry. There's a mere holding force in the centre of the battlefield, and the left flank up in the air. So the first corps advances to the gap as quickly as possible, while staying out of maximum range of the French, and using the cover of the woods, some cavalry is sent right over to the far flank, far right, to try and get the outflanking manoeuvre. There's an overview of the battlefield. As can be seen, the infantry on the right are protected only by some light cavalry, and immediately some French cavalry come round to threaten that flank, only to find there's artillery on the other side of that field, just waiting for a chance to shoot them. With their elite light cavalry positioned to counter any charges from the enemy cavalry, the 1st Division pushes forward, and the Guard Division, the cavalry, the heavy cuirassiers, moves directly behind, ready to go charging through the infantry and engage the enemy, and try and make this battle won here and now, before the rest of the French army has a chance to react and join. The heavy artillery in the centre is also revealed, and the cavalry that's attempting that outflanking manoeuvre is beaten back. The French cavalry immediately accept the challenge and attempt to drive off the Austrian light cavalry that's protecting that flank. The yellows are misses, and the Austrian cavalry only manages 2 on its attack, on its defence. But fortunately, tired from the long ride and from fleeing for so long through enemy territory, the French cavalry only manage 1 hit and are beaten and driven back. The attack is on. And forward the infantry go, and this was possibly the first error. The artillery and the enemy had moved back just out of charge range of the cavalry, and the infantry had blocked them from seeing them. In hindsight, the cavalry should have gone first and driven all before them, with the infantry coming through as a steady reserve to exploit the gap. Meanwhile, other cavalry have gone on the far right and are encircling the wood to try and outflank the enemy and cause them one more headache. When choosing this battlefield, it's actually a difficult one for the French because their advantage lies in numbers, whereas the Austrians lies in quality. And the aim is to try and make the battle all in that small area where quality will count over numbers and we can drive them through. Meanwhile, the French scouting parties have come all the way around the flank and are proving a real nuisance. Let's explain the rules that we're using. So the house rules are dropped in here. Are that if you spot reserves, you can turn them over and see what they are, but you only prevent them making a reserve move if you're still there when they attempt it. That's why I haven't put the figures on yet. So if you can drive the light cavalry off, you can still make a reserve move. It stops the sort of suicidal light cavalry charges, which stop the whole reserve from moving. The other French heavy cavalry have done a good job on their advanced infantry, and they've come streaming back through the wood, which has opened a gap for the cuirassiers to now charge through. The light cavalry, fresh from seeing off the enemy once, have decided to attack again and bravely charge in their weakened state, but they do have elan. If either of those charges can succeed, the way is open for the infantry to pour through and the grenadiers to follow up. But, first of all, the cuirassiers are beaten back. Will the light cavalry push through? Unfortunately not. And there's a chance of the whole attack stalling while the infantry have to advance into cavalry. Although the cavalry are weakened, it's still a threat they can't ignore. With Austrian infantry now pouring through the woods and sensing his left flank starting to crumble, Moreau evacuates the artillery before losing it, and the horse artillery scampers back to Arniesdorf to join the defence there, while the left flank grimly tries to hold on against now overwhelming Austrian numbers. A unit of cavalry is dispatched to the left to try and see off this annoying scouting party, which is potentially holding up the entire advance, which will be the key to storming into Arniesdorf from the front while the right hook comes into play. Avoiding the cuirassiers now passing through the wood, by the edge of the wood, the French cavalry again charges into the defenceless infantry. They put up some defence, but all five are hits, and they get roundly thrashed and are sent fleeing back through the light cavalry, which has also been forced to withdraw. Although the French are recoiling, the Austrians seem to be also recoiling. Time for the grenadiers perhaps here, but they are needed in the central attack onto Arniesdorf. So you see the infantry flooding back through the cavalry. But now that French cavalry is very weak, and with the heavy cavalry behind the wood, the only ones holding this flank. Both players' turns are being counted here, so it's round 6, the 11th turn. Just a little note to show that the French have been extremely active and consistently getting high initiative rolls. Something the Austrians really could have done with. The Austrian infantry, which has been struggling through the wood, now appears in front of the French cavalry to see them off. They're badly weakened already, and the French line shoots back with only the heavy cavalry on the far extreme looking to hold up flank. But the bulk of the attack has been stopped. So if the grenadiers come this way, it's too far round to get to Arniesdorf. What's left are going to have to do their best. The Austrian infantry bravely storms out the wood and attempts to finish off that cavalry and then trap the other French cavalry, so they have no retreat from the cuirassiers who are going to come through and surely destroy them. The cavalry are driven back, and the Austrian cuirassiers, sensing the urgency of the situation, pour through the centre, bypassing the French cavalry left stranded between the two woods and facing the rest of the division, which is advancing. The lone unit of Austrian cavalry on the left flank tussles manfully with its opponents to keep this flank clear and free up the centre to join the assault, only to see more cavalry appearing round the woods in front of the Leonberg. It can be seen that the Austrian grenadiers have now committed. Sensing the urgency, they also going straight for Arniesdorf and hoping there are enough survivors on the right flank to join in and hook their way round, as the French defenders there seem to crumble back towards defending the objective. The French defenders of Arniesberg now reveal themselves and turn to face the right hook that's coming round them. With the cuirassiers there and a unit of infantry coming through the wood, it's understandable. But there's also now attack now starting from the centre. Unfortunately, command issues have meant only one unit has come forward, with the grenadiers come behind them. This is going to really stretch the general's resources. The artillery open up and start to inflict more damage on the cuirassiers. Another turn passes by. On the far right, the remnants of the right hook attempt to pursue their advantage and finish off the rest of the French cavalry, maybe breaking the will of the army to kite on and break them there and then, without taking the objective of Arniesdorf. But Arniesdorf must still be taken, and the units pour up the Great Arnie Berg to fight uphill against stout defending. With odds of 2 to 1, the Austrians managed to force back the French defenders, but not with high casualties. Arnieberg is now taken, but Arniesdorf is looking as strong as ever. Ah, this breaks my heart just looking back at it. The cuirassiers, full of verve and fresh, and throwing loads and loads of dice, storm into the retreating French horse artillery, which is down to its last couple of men, and low on ammunition. For once the call yellows as hits, not the reds and blues, and they fluff it completely, lose and get repulsed, to retreat back in front of the French reserve of infantry, a disastrous spot for the noble cuirassiers. With the general busy trying to organise all these isolated units, that's just what all the Austrians managed this turn. And with the cavalry closing on the left flank, the centre is not going to have any reserve moves available. It's going to have to reveal itself and hope there's enough energy in the army to join in the assault before it's too late. While the Austrian line infantry shows its quality and drives the French off the Arnie Berg, the Austrian grenadiers in their shiny white uniforms come in to start. They're hoping that the guys in front can do enough damage and weaken the French resolve and defences of Arniesdorf that they'll come storming over and in true grenadier fashion storm into the city and capture it for the glory of Austria. With the one remaining Austrian cavalry on the left flank having battled itself to a standstill, the other French cavalry is now able to storm in and start harassing this central assault. Nothing for them to do but take it. They could have formed square and defended themselves, but Neuerdorf called on their honour to march forward, fending off the cavalry as they go. And so the assault on Arniesdorf begins, driving them off the hill in a strange situation, the French now trying to themselves storm onto the Arniesberg. The grenadiers are also swinging round, ready to make their assault. If only those cannons had been taken out, if only they went there, then the grenadiers could go straight in from this side, relying on the cuirassiers to hold back that reserve infantry. Flushed with success, the Austrian regulars storm off the Arnieberg and down into the French infantry, so they can storm through and take those guns which should be gone already. On the right hand side, the grenadiers are starting to look for a space to get in. They can join in this battle, but they're very difficult for them to actually get to Arniesdorf without running the gauntlet of the artillery again, which has been steadily reloading. First part of the plan successful, and they storm through and the French are sent routing. Unfortunately, this leaves the grenadiers in front of the artillery in grape shot range. They're needed. Every man is needed to take Arniesdorf, and they're going to get peppered. In ruthless and determined mode, Neuerdorf now threw forward those infantry for one last effort. Tired, having to clamber over the walls of the village and battle through against the defended position. Their job was not really to take the town. Their job was to pull down some gaps in the walls, cause some damage, and leave the floodgates open for the grenadiers to come storming in, take the glory as always, and then try and hold the town for another turn while reserves pull up and defences are prepared. Being fatigued and having to clamber across the defences, only 3 dice, 1 hit. All defenders need is 1 hit for a draw, and anything above that's going to be more damage and they're going to get badly mauled. They're full strength 6. They've been preparing defences all afternoon as they've watched the Austrians advance. 8 dice are going to come flooding down for a torrent of pain. But having seen their colleagues sent flying for the hills, the French rabble, completely terrified, completely whiff, and all 8 misses, no damage at all, and the glorious Austrians triumphantly march into Arniesdorf, hoisting flags and cheers, exhausted, but happy and joyous in achieving their general's objectives. But this heroic achievement and sacrifice was to naught, as they were surrounded by fresh French units and no time to dig in. It also meant much the frustration of the general, that his grenadiers that were poised to enter the town with some chance of holding it, now to stand back and watch. No room for them as well, while their comrades fought to the last man and died, and Arniesdorf was again in French hands. With fresh French units now also blocking out the grenadiers, and more reserves appearing all the time, and the Austrian attack running out of steam. With a heavy heart, Neuerdorf decided to call off the attack and pull back. The French army might have been mauled, but they're still there. They still have a place to sleep for the night. They're able to lick their wounds and continue their long march home on the next day. While the Austrians have to consider, do they have strength remaining to pursue them again and track them down and next time get the decisive victory and smash these French once and for all? Only history will tell. So, thank you for listening through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd really be interested to get some feedback and hear what you think of this kind of format. Won't be doing it for every game, but I think particularly for this campaign, it's of great interest, and I've got a couple of other campaigns in mind that I'd like to try and bring to attention, some more obscure ones, and bring to life a bit, and then act them out with some battles. I also got some ideas for using figures on campaign maps and stuff like that. So, any feedback? Hopefully some encouragement, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed it, and until the next time, keep rolling!
我们要互相亏欠。